The grandfather clock echoed through the stillness of the Salt residence, each chime at 3 a.m., like a battering ram against Philip's fractured composure. He stood at the nursery doorway, shoulders caved in, eyes hollow with sleepless regret. The weight of single fatherhood eclipsed any boardroom war he'd ever won, pressing on him with the crushing intimacy of loneliness. Moonlight poured through the sheer drapes, sketching distorted shapes across the walls, phantoms of the future he'd once imagined. Dust motes sparkled in the beams like fragments of old dreams, swirling above the crib where his son thrashed, red-faced and inconsolable. Each scream cut sharper than the last, slicing through Philip's chest with surgical cruelty, reminding him again, this was a war he had no weapons for. His hands hovered, trembled, withdrew. He had tried to hold his son before, and each time the boy recoiled as if from a stranger, as if his father's touch was too foreign, too full of grief to offer comfort. The room reeked of formula, baby powder, and something sadder, lavender from unopened swaddles, folded neatly long before the world fell apart. The blanket stack remained untouched in the corner, a ghostly monument to hope. She had folded them during that final trimester when they still believed in beginnings. Now the silence between cries mocked everything they'd planned. Philip's bare feet dug into the soft rug, the one she'd chosen, pastel blues and yellows meant to soothe, to signal joy. But now they were merely markers of what never came to be. His toes curled into the fibers, a desperate effort to stay grounded as grief threatened to drown him. Across the room, the rocking chair stood motionless, its comforting rhythm long gone. He could still see her there, swaying gently, her hand on her swollen belly, auburn hair glowing like firelight, singing lullabies that made him roll his eyes, then fall in love with her all over again. That indentation in the cushion still existed in his mind, in his marrow. The mobile above the crib spun in slow circles, creaking slightly in air that didn't move. Wooden animals, once charming souvenirs from a boutique in Provence, now looked like mocking sentinels from a forgotten life. His son's sobs escalated, raw, jagged, desperate. Philip's knees ached as he shuffled closer, watching the small body arch and twist, lungs straining with another scream. The baby's onesie, dinosaurs and drool, was too big now. He wasn't gaining weight. The pediatrician's words rang again. Failure to thrive. Another phrase Philip couldn't fix, couldn't buy his way out of. He remembered sitting in that sterile room, his watch gleaming obscenely under fluorescent lights, while inside he collapsed. The humidifier wheezed uselessly in the corner, casting pale light over the still pristine changing table. Like the rest of the nursery, it was a cruel illusion of readiness. The mirror above it reflected someone he didn't know, cheekbones too sharp, beard overgrown, eyes red-rimmed from crying he'd never admit to. His sweatpants clung damply to legs that used to stride confidently across glass-walled boardrooms. The image mocked him. The CEO, the strategist, the man who closed billion-dollar acquisitions, couldn't get a 3-month-old to sleep. And now his baby was wailing again, this time with panic in the pitch. Instinct took over. Philip lunged forward, arms out, but he froze mid-reach. Last night his son had screamed louder when he tried to hold him, as if even the infant sensed his father's unraveling. The shame had blistered deeper than any corporate failure. So his hands dropped, limp. The monitor crackled with every gasp, every sob. Another cruel echo of how alone they truly were. He imagined her voice again, teasing him awake with a smile. Your turn, Daddy. But she wasn't in bed. She wasn't anywhere. And that absence howled louder than the crying. Outside, thunder rolled in slow waves as the storm built. Lightning revealed the perfectly landscaped lawn, a tribute to order that mocked his inner chaos. Rain began to tap the window pane like fingers, counting all the ways he was failing. And God, he was failing. Again. Still. The baby's voice cracked from overuse, the sound high, sharp, unbearable. Philip's phone buzzed near the dresser, displaying his assistant's missed calls. 17. 17 reminders of a life he no longer had the capacity to care about. The company, the prestige, The endless expectations. They meant nothing in this nursery. Nothing next to this screaming child he couldn't comfort. He scrolled past the pediatrician's number again. Pride kept his thumb from pressing it. That stubborn executive pride, now lethal. Was it better to call, or worse to fail again? He stared at the phone until the screen blurred, his vision swimming. A fresh wave of sobs from the crib jolted him, the scent of that French baby shampoo rising with every kick from the infant's legs. He remembered her face when she'd chosen it, her laugh. That's the one, she'd said. The memory seared him. He hadn't visited her grave in weeks. Couldn't. Seeing her name on granite made it final in a way no lullaby ever could. The phone slipped from his palm and hit the hardwood. The screen cracked. When had it cracked? He didn't know. Didn't care. Only that her face was still his wallpaper, and it stared back at him now, smiling, beautiful, gone. The cries became ragged, guttural. The medical app blinked warnings. Too long. Too much. Philip's hands trembled as he fumbled to unlock the screen again. He swiped past his mother's number. She was on that Alaskan cruise. His sister was home with twins. The nanny agency? Booked solid for months. There was no cavalry coming. Just this moment. This baby. This breaking point. His legs gave out as panic slammed into him. His back hit the wall, the cool surface offering no relief. His breath came in gas. Tears flooded without warning. He dropped to the floor, folding awkwardly like a man who no longer knew how to carry his own weight. His son's cries grew hoarser, each hitch and breath mirrored by Philip's own chest. The perfume on his wife's sweater clung to his skin. He'd pulled it from her closet weeks ago. He wore it sometimes. It still smelled like her. He could almost hear her. "You've got this, Phil," she used to say. Now that memory broke him. The phone vibrated violently. It lit up with an unknown number. Normally, he'd ignore it. Tonight, it felt like the last lifeline. He answered with a raw, "Hello." The voice was chipper, professional. 24/7 emergency nanny services. He could have cried all over again. He barely managed to recite his address, tripping over words. The woman promised help would arrive in 30 minutes. It felt like both forever and a miracle. He ended the call and sagged back against the wall, equal parts grateful and ashamed. 30 minutes. He tried to rock his son in the meantime, but it didn't work. Nothing did. Just sobbing, rocking, pacing. While outside, the storm reached its full fury, lightning cracking, thunder rattling the glass. And then, the doorbell rang. One soft chime. He and the baby both stilled. A silence as sharp as a needle filled the nursery. He moved to stand. His body ached. His soul ached more. Philip staggered down the hallway, his feet sticking slightly to the floor. Family photos lined the walls. He couldn't look at them. Not now. He reached the foyer. The chandelier trembled with the storm's rage. On the monitor, a figure stood hunched beneath the rain. He expected a stranger. Instead, the camera revealed someone impossible. Someone soaked, trembling, and familiar. Her hood fell back, braids slicked to her cheeks. And there they were. Those silver rings on her fingers, her wide brown eyes meeting his like time had never passed. His breath caught. Her voice, though not yet heard, already echoing somewhere deep in the part of him that had never let go. Her chest rose and fell too fast, her mind scrambling to reconcile the man before her with the ghost who had haunted her dreams for years. Philip Salt, the boy who once whispered poetry against her neck in their dorm room, now stood before her, a shadow of himself. His once bright eyes dulled by exhaustion, his frame slumped like a marionette with its strings cut. The sharp angles of his face cast into aching familiarity by the chandelier's light. From down the hall, a baby's cry cleaved through the silence. Raw, real. A sound that shattered any illusion that she was dreaming. He was a father. He had a child. The same boy who once kissed her shoulder under string lights and swore he'd never leave now, stood barefoot and broken in a hallway filled with echoes of another woman. His eyes darted briefly to the family portrait on the wall. His late wife frozen in a smile, while Amara stood flesh and blood, soaked and stunned on his doorstep, fingers tightening around the strap of her emergency nanny kit. She fought the insane urge to brush the raindrops sliding down his jaw. He still smelled the same. Expensive cologne, woodsy and rich, now mixed with formula and fatigue. It hit her like a punch to the gut. "Amara," he said at last, her name breaking on his lips like a prayer left unfinished for too long. She only nodded, professionalism warring with memory. "Emergency nanny services, dispatch 4072. I got a call from this address." Philip's expression crumpled. He dragged a hand down his face, groaning. "Christ, I must have dialed the wrong number." The baby's cry grew sharper, more frantic. Philip flinched, stepping toward the nursery, then hesitating, his eyes dragging over her. Soaked clothes clinging to curves he once traced with reverence. The nose ring he bought her on her 21st birthday. The tiny scar above her eyebrow he kissed better after a bike crash. A minefield of memories between them. "You're the babysitter?" he rasped, disbelief and thunder rumbling in tandem. The lights flickered overhead. Amara swallowed. "Apparently." Something in him broke. His shoulders sagged. Without a word, she moved past him into the house, the smell of lemon cleaner failing to mask the sour milk, the tired chaos. Toys, laundry, bottles. It was a war zone of sleeplessness and survival. This was not the Philip she remembered, the meticulous business student who color-coded notes, now barely keeping it together. The nursery door creaked open. A red-faced baby wailed in a sweat-damp onesie, flailing in distress. Without thinking, Amara dropped her kit and stepped in, hands sure where Philip's had trembled. "Shh, sweetheart, I've got you," she whispered, cradling him to her chest. Her fingers checked for fever. She swayed instinctively, murmuring comfort as his cries softened to hiccups. Philip appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with awe, and something close to grief. How did you—" he whispered. "He hasn't stopped crying in hours." "He's overtired," she said softly. "And this diaper's too tight. See?" She worked quickly, efficiently, like she'd done 100 times before. But never like this. Never his child. And still, her hands moved with practiced calm, his baby settling against her shoulder with a sigh. Philip sagged against the doorframe. "I didn't know what else to do," he confessed, voice cracking. She glanced at the framed wedding photo on the dresser. A radiant bride, a tuxedoed Philip smiling, young and in love, with someone else. Still, Amara kept her voice level. "Sit down before you fall down," she said gently, nodding to the glider. She took the rocking chair, the baby drowsing in her arms, and began to hum. He obeyed like a man in a trance. Sweatpants, bare feet, disbelief written all over his face. She studied the baby. That nose, Philip's. That stubborn jaw, just like during their old late-night debates, when he'd kiss her mid-argument just to win. The monitor buzzed softly. The storm faded into a gentle patter outside. "I have to be in Tokyo in 12 hours, Philip groaned suddenly, rubbing his eyes. "The nanny canceled. My mom's overseas, and I can't—" His voice trailed off, a silent admission hanging in the air. "I can't do this alone." Without thinking, Amara spoke. "I can stay, just until you get back." Philip's head snapped up. "Why would you, after everything?" The baby stirred. His tiny hand brushed her necklace, the one Philip gave her the night he promised her forever. She looked away. Thunder had given way to rain, but inside the air was thick with ghosts and what-ifs. Philip reached out, his fingers grazing hers where she held the baby. Just a touch, but it sent electricity through her. Some things time couldn't erase. "Stay," he breathed. One word. A world. Amara's fingers curled tighter around the baby. Her pulse roared. The weight of him in her arms felt like both anchor and avalanche. He moved nothing else, just watched her, as if her answer might resurrect or destroy him. She forced her voice even. "I'll need the pediatrician's number, feeding schedule, allergies," a shield of professionalism, but he flinched nonetheless. "There's a notebook in the kitchen," he said, voice brittle. "My wife wrote everything down before—" His eyes drifted to a framed ultrasound photo. "Baby salt coming soon," in looping cursive. Amara swallowed the lump in her throat. This wasn't just any job. This wasn't just any child. His phone buzzed again. Tokyo, 6:15 a.m. The screen lit up his hollowed face. He swore under his breath, fingers fumbling to silence the alarm. He wobbled. She caught him instinctively, palm brushing his bare forearm. "You're too warm," she muttered. "When did you last sleep?" Her thumb pressed lightly to his pulse. Still fast, still familiar, and still, heartbreakingly, his sting instead of the ache behind her ribs. The ache that had been growing since the moment she stepped into this house, since she'd taken Noah in her arms and felt her entire world tilt on its axis. She scrubbed harder, letting the sponge squeak angrily against the plastic bottles, blinking away tears that refused to fall. She wouldn't cry here, not in his kitchen, not while wearing her shirt that still smelled like rain and regret. The faucet hissed as she turned it off, water dripping in slow, taunting plinks. Amara braced her hands on the edge of the sink, her knuckles white, the silence pressing in like a storm cloud too heavy to hold its shape. A soft thud upstairs, closet door, suitcase closing, jolted her from her daze, and she pushed back, drying her hands on a towel that bore the faint outline of a baby duck. She shouldn't be here, not like this, not swept back into his orbit by a baby in a storm and 10 years of unresolved longing. But she was here, and the problem with being back inside Philip's world was that some part of her still fit too easily. She moved to the living room, guided by muscle memory and a desire to breathe somewhere else. The lamp by the sofa cast a halo of light over a scattered stack of parenting books, a burp cloth, and a half-finished bottle of gripe water. She picked it up, then set it back down again, unsure why it mattered. Everything in this house was a contradiction. Grief and hope, structure and chaos. Philip's need for control colliding with the unpredictable force of fatherhood. Her fingers brushed over a forgotten pacifier on the coffee table. "Amara," his voice quiet but ragged, pulled her around. Philip stood at the base of the stairs, barefoot, hair damp, a duffel slung over one shoulder. There was no tie, no watch, no armor. Just him, exhausted, undone. Their eyes met, and she felt the familiar thud of her heart stutter, then tumble, then catch. "I should go," she said, voice soft. He nodded but didn't move. "You could stay, just a little longer." Amara exhaled a shaky breath, her chest tight with too many truths. "This isn't my life, Philip." "No," he said, "but maybe it doesn't have to be over either." Her laugh cracked like glass. "You can't say things like that to me. Not when you're getting on a plane in 2 hours." Philip's throat worked as he swallowed. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I just know that when I saw you holding him, I didn't feel so alone anymore." Neither spoke after that. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't empty. It held breath, weight, maybe even the shape of something not quite broken. She looked down at her still damp shirt, at the burp cloth, the pacifier, the quiet upstairs. "Just tonight," she said. "But when you come back, we talk. No more ghosts." Philip nodded. No more ghosts. And for the first time in 10 years, Amara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the past could give way to something new, that undid her all over again. The sight of it, a half-packed suitcase, felt like a threat and a promise in one. Like he was leaving, but maybe not yet, maybe waiting, maybe hoping. Amara stopped just inside the doorway, unsure whether she was trespassing or welcome, her fingers tightening around the edge of her sleeve. Philip stood by the window, his silhouette outlined by the rain-streaked glass, one hand braced against the frame, like it was the only thing holding him upright. "I wasn't supposed to see you again," she said softly, her voice raw. "Not like this." Philip turned. The pain in his expression was so naked, so honest it made her stomach twist. "Me neither." The silence between them stretched again, fragile and aching. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, like a memory trying to speak. "I hated you," she whispered. "For a long time." He nodded. "I hated myself longer." Amara stepped forward, slow, cautious, like one wrong move would send them spiraling back into the years they'd spent apart. "Why didn't you tell me about Noah?" Philip looked down at the floor, jaw clenched. "Because by the time I knew for sure, you were already gone, and I didn't know how to reach you." You vanished, Amara, like we'd never happened. She flinched but nodded. It was true, she had, because staying had felt impossible, because leaving had felt like survival. I thought he was Danielle's, she admitted, until I saw his eyes. Philip let out a bitter laugh, his gaze lifting to hers. He has your stubborn mouth. Amara blinked hard. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. He doesn't remember her, Philip added quietly. Not really. Just moments. Songs. The way she smelled after baking. But it's fading. And he's starting to ask about things I don't know how to answer. And you think I do? I think you're the only person who ever saw me, all of me, and didn't run. Amara choked on a laugh that was almost a sob. I did run, Philip. That's the only thing I did. His eyes found hers again. But you came back. That undid her. Not the accusation, the hope buried in it. He took a slow step forward, then another, until he was standing in front of her again, so close she could smell the faint traces of soap and rain on his skin. So close her heart didn't know where it ended, and he began. You think we're broken beyond repair? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, she answered honestly, but I know I still feel everything. Philip reached out, his fingers brushing hers, tentative, reverent. I don't sleep. Not really. Not since you. And I don't breathe, she whispered. Not fully. Not without you. He closed the last of the distance, his forehead pressing to hers. Then let's try, even if we fail. The suitcase still sat gaping on the bench, but the distance between them, 10 years, a dead wife, a child, 1,000 unspoken words, had finally begun to close, ribcage with anticipation. Amara? He called softly into the hush, half expecting the stillness to answer him. But then, a creak overhead, a faint shuffle, and then her voice, quiet but unmistakably hers, floated down from the nursery. We're up here. His legs carried him before his mind caught up, 2 steps at a time, his heart leaping against his ribs with each one. When he reached the doorway, what he saw rooted him to the spot. She was sitting in the rocking chair, Noah nestled against her chest, already drifting to sleep. The soft yellow glow of the lamp haloed her figure, casting her in a light so gentle it made his throat ache. She looked up when she felt his gaze, her lips curving into something soft and real, and his. Hey, she whispered, like they hadn't spent 3 lifetimes apart. Like this was just another ordinary evening in a life they hadn't dared dream until now. He stepped in slowly, reverently, like the room itself was sacred. Hey, he echoed, his voice hoarse with everything he couldn't quite say yet. She rose carefully, passing Noah into his arms without a word. And God, he'd held power and contracts and fortunes in his hands, but nothing had ever made him feel more fragile or more whole than the tiny weight of this boy curling into his chest. Noah sighed, eyes fluttering shut again, and Philip looked over at her, this woman who had broken his heart and somehow made it whole again, and said simply, I'm home. Amara crossed the room and slipped her hand into his. Welcome back. They stood like that for a moment, father, mother, son, on the precipice of something new. And when Philip leaned down and pressed a kiss to her temple, she closed her eyes and let the warmth sink deep. The past was a story, the pain, a chapter. But this was the beginning of the life they'd fought so hard to find their way back to. The one they would write together. Amara's fingers brushed lightly over Noah's back. Philip swallowed hard. And you? He asked. Her breath hitched. I didn't let myself think about it. The honesty in her voice struck deeper than any lie ever could. He knew exactly what she meant, because if she let herself miss him, she'd have to admit just how much she still cared. Gently, he took Noah from her arms, pressing a tender kiss to his son's forehead before laying him into the crib. The baby sighed, nestling into the blankets without stirring. When Philip turned back to Amara, she was watching him with an unreadable expression. Longing, hesitation, hope. Come here, he murmured, holding out his hand. She took it without a word. The master bedroom remained cloaked in darkness, the curtains drawn tight against the night. Neither of them reached for the light. There was something sacred in the shadows, something fragile and charged that made the air between them hum. Philip's hands trembled as he cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the gentle curve of her cheekbones. "Tell me this is real," he whispered. Amara leaned into his touch, eyes fluttering shut. "It's real." He kissed her then, slow, deep, pouring every unsaid word into her lips. Her fingers curled into his hair, pulling him closer, kneading him near, closer than breath. They undressed each other with reverent shaking hands. Each brush of skin was rediscovery. Each scar, each curve, relearned like scripture. "You're still so beautiful," he breathed against her collarbone, his lips following the path of his voice. Amara arched into him, breath catching in short, uneven gasps. "Philip." He silenced her with a kiss, hands mapping her like a man tracing the shape of his soul. This was not just desire. This was reclamation. A decade of grief, longing, and unspoken love spilled into every touch, every whisper. When he finally entered her, it wasn't just a joining, it was surrender. Amara clung to him, her nails biting into his shoulders, her legs wrapped tightly around him like she'd never let go again. "I love you," he gasped into her mouth. "God, I never stopped." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered back, her voice raw and breaking. They moved together, slow, desperate, as if time could be rewritten with each movement. The world fell away until there was only this. Them, here, now. When release finally came, it wasn't just pleasure, it was catharsis. Philip buried his face in her neck, his body shuddering, years of loneliness dissolving between them. Amara held him through it all, fingers stroking his hair, lips pressed to his temple. Later, tangled in the sheets, her back pressed to his chest and his arm heavy around her waist, she watched the dawn bleed gold across the bedroom. She traced the faint scar on his shoulder, the one he'd gotten falling off his bike in high school, as if relearning the map of him. A soft cry echoed from the nursery. Philip stirred instantly, his body tensing before his eyes even opened. The reflex of a father etched deep. "I'll get him," Amara murmured, pressing a kiss to his collarbone. Philip's hand caught her wrist, voice rough with sleep. "You don't have to." "I want to." She slipped from his embrace, pulling his shirt over her head, the scent of cedar and sea salt wrapping around her like home. Barefoot, she padded into the nursery. Noah stood in his crib, chubby fist gripping the rails. "Ma!" he shouted, bouncing on unsteady legs. Amara froze. Had he just... "Mama." The word struck her like lightning. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She'd been called many things in her life. Amara, sweetheart, even baby girl in Philip's more daring moments. But never this. She scooped Noah into her arms, burying her face in his curls. "Good morning, my love," she whispered, voice trembling. Tiny hands patted her cheeks, sticky and delighted. Strong arms wrapped around them both. Philip's chin came to rest on her shoulder. "I heard that," he murmured, lips brushing her ear. Amara leaned into him, Noah warm between them. "He might not even know what it means," she said softly. "He knows," Philip whispered, turning her to face him. "He's been watching you. The songs, the oatmeal, the way you hold him when he cries. You've been his mama for a long time." He kissed her forehead. Noah chose that moment to grab a fistful of Philip's hair. "Da!" Philip winced but grinned. Yeah, we're both doomed." The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee, golden sunlight spilling across the floor. Amara hummed as she stirred oatmeal. Noah sat in his high chair, banging a spoon in rhythm. Philip appeared behind her, hands warm on her hips, nose brushing beneath her ear. "You're incredible," he murmured. Amara turned in his arms. "I'm just doing what feels right. That's what makes it incredible." His thumb swept oatmeal from the corner of her mouth, and his voice softened. "You fit here, Amara, like you were always meant to be ours." Her heart ached from the raw truth. She had spent her life feeling like a misplaced puzzle piece, but here, with Noah's laughter and Philip's steady presence, she finally belonged. The oak tree stood tall and familiar, ancient branches dressed in white lanterns that flickered like stars as dusk settled in. Noah toddled through the grass, his tiny suit smudged with dirt, a fistful of dandelions in his grip. Philip reached for Amara's hand. "Ready?" She nodded. "More than." No grand vows, no rehearsed speeches, just three simple promises. To choose you every day, to build a home with you, to love Noah as my own. When Philip slid the delicate oak leaf ring onto her finger, Noah clapped, scattering dandelion fluff into the air. Later, beneath the sheltering branches, Noah asleep in his carrier, Philip pulled her close. "We did it," he whispered. She smiled up at him. "We're just getting started." His lips met hers, slow and sure, and the tree that had once heard their first "I love you" now bore witness to forever. The lanterns swayed overhead like blessings. Time slowed. Philip traced gentle circles on her back through her dress, his voice a hushed reverence. "I used to dream about this," he murmured. "Not just the wedding. This, you, here, with us, under this tree, where I knew I couldn't live without you." Amara's breath hitched. She threaded her fingers through his hair. The scent of jasmine drifted in the night. The damp grass beneath them smelled of rain and earth. Noah's baby shampoo, sweet vanilla, still clung to her skin. She closed her eyes, committing it all to memory. The scrape of Philip's stubble, the sound of Noah's steady breaths, the chirp of crickets like lullabies. A soft snuffle stirred the quiet. Noah blinked awake in his carrier, then smiled, lifting his arms. "Da-da," he murmured. Philip scooped him up with ease, the baby curling into his shoulder with a sleepy sigh. Amara reached to smooth Noah's curls, her thumb brushing the birthmark behind his ear, the same as Philip's. Love swelled inside her like a rising tide. "Let's go home," Philip whispered. And home was no longer a place. It was this, a life built on whispered confessions, bedtime songs, oatmeal battles, and the steady presence of the man who had always reached for her hand. Philip's fingers laced through hers as they walked back toward the house, Noah dozing again in his arms, the lanterns swaying behind them in silent, golden farewell.